Jackson with Max and Brent, unlocking the minds of the industry's top real estate professionals. And now, here are your hosts, Max Rabin and Brent Jackson.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Keyed In Podcast. I'm Max Rabin.
And I'm Leslie Backoff.
Where's Brent?
You know, it's summertime.
It's
I don't know
summertime,
where,
so goodbye,
where Brent is. But hopefully he's somewhere maybe warm or nicer than our rainy DC weather.
Yeah, it's a little crappy today. Yeah. I just got back from Bermuda. I was at Jonathan Taylor's wedding. Jonathan Taylor is one of the owners of our company, TTR Sotheby's International Realty. He got remarried and with another guest, Trish Yan, who was on our show, and it was really quite a beautiful occasion. It was weather was a little weird on a couple of days, which
humid,
is like
or
what's that?
Like humid or
like almost hurricane
rainy.
on one day on their wedding day. But
so
then
rain is good on a wedding day.
That's what we're told. It's just that when you bring everyone to a tropical place,
sure.
Right? Anyway, so that's what happened to me this week. It was fantastic. So today our guest is Tom Kolker with TTR Sotheby's International Realty. Tom actually started his career in sports broadcasting, and of course, that's why it's like no Brent here. If Brent was here, it would be all sports talk, I think, unfortunately.
That's okay. So, we can do a good job. I think we can hold down the fort today. Yeah.
Well, Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's start from the beginning a little bit. So where are you from originally? Just talk a little bit about that, and then I want to get the sports thing.
Yeah. So I'm a Washingtonian.
Okay.
Grew up over by AU, and then eventually moved across the river to McLean. Went to McLean High School, and then went to GW. And so that's where I actually started doing broadcast work, was when I was at GW. But my whole family is from here. Both sides of the family. My dad's side actually owned Washington Beef, which was now where Union Market is.
Okay. Oh, cool.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, they distributed beef to all the rest of the Palm, all the restaurants in the city.
We're in like those the side, you know what I'm talking about,
stalls?
The side stalls, or actually
no,
in the
they had a plant. So
it
was
okay.
It's not right where the market is right now, but on like right around there was actually where their original plant was.
Very cool.
So yeah, my mom's family's from Arlington, and one of my grandfathers was a pretty big builder in Virginia. So that's sort of how I always had an interest in real estate, kind of growing up because I was around it. But then I have an uncle who was the voice of the Wizards for 20 years on Comcast Sports.
Wait, who's your uncle?
Steve Buckhantz.
Steve Buckhantz is your uncle?
He's my uncle. So that's how I got into broadcasting.
Yeah.
After I played sports for a million years and got hurt. And then when that was the original dream, was I wanted to play football. And then got hit wrong one time.
No.
Oh, man.
And that ended, but had always followed my uncle, who was at Fox 5 forever. And then he was the voice of Navy football. So on weekends, I would go down to Annapolis and hang out with him. And I was in the booth with him and John Feinstein, which was awesome. And I'd wear the headset and be really quiet. And then started doing broadcasting while I was at GW.
Okay.
And just, had a knack for the play-by-play part of it, kind of like him. But he was a major influence on me. And then just started getting jobs right out of college doing play-by-play. And that's how I got into sports before I ever really found real estate.
Cool. What were some of the sports that you did play-by-play for?
So football, basketball, soccer. I was doing a lot of games out west for a while for the Pac-12 and the West Coast Conference, and then came back here, and I was the first play-by-play voice for New York City FC MLS team.
Cool. Nice.
So it was on WFAN in New York. So then did a lot. Well, I was here before I went out west. I was doing stuff for Georgetown and GW. And then when I came back, I was filling in doing some stuff for Georgetown. So football was always my passion.
Yeah.
But ended up doing a lot of soccer and hoops.
Cool.
Did you have any background in soccer though?
Like every other kid, I played when I was little.
Sure.
But really, it was just when I was out west for a while, I was doing play-by-play basketball for the University of Portland. And for anybody who knows college soccer, just the soccer world, Portland is like a mecca for soccer. You have Nike and Adidas right there. And the Northwest, Portland and Seattle, it's a huge soccer culture. So they have some of the top programs in the country, and they would get 5,000-6,000 people at a soccer game. So they started televising and broadcasting their games, and they needed someone to do soccer. So they just asked me if I could do it, and I said sure, and started doing it, and just to kind of help them out, and it kind of took off from there.
Did you have a good like goal cheer?
No,
You
I know.
Nothing
No, I
crazy.
mean, if you're from DC, you know
Yeah.
Dave Johnson. It's in the net. And
Yeah.
that's, you
Yeah,
know,
right,
that's
right,
his
right.
call. But no,
No
I
little
never had like a
phrases
natural.
like that?
No.
Okay.
It's just, you know, you play by play, you're just reacting to what's happening. You're not,
Right.
you know, you're just
Right.
that's, if you're doing that, you're doing a good job. So it was just whatever came out naturally at the time. But some of those guys have great signature calls
Yeah.
for sure.
But you were an experienced broadcaster, so that's why they wanted to bring you into that. So
Yeah, I mean, I'd done all the other sports,
Mhm.
and you know, every sport is a little different. Like football, the play is really quick, and then you have time in between each play. Basketball, it's just about the rhythm of
Mhm.
up, especially if you're doing radio. Like the radio and
For
TV
sure.
are very different broadcasts.
Yeah.
For me, baseball was actually the toughest because it's the slowest,
So
and
much
you're
time
almost
between.
Sure.
you're almost like filling in with everything but the game. It's such a numbers game, and
Yeah.
there's a million stats for everything. So you're talking about everything, and then, you know, in between that, you're describing kind of the action. So for me, that was actually the hardest one.
Right. You have to have a little more filler.
Oh my,
and-
yeah. I mean, just the sheets and the notes, and I mean, it's,
I always wonder about that when they're giving some really random stat, like how many times that like this left-handed hitter has hit against a right-hander who throws this kind of slider.
yeah, no. I
Yeah.
mean, it's up to every broadcaster to do their prep, and that's
Right.
what we do. That's most of the job, really. Is 90% of it is you end up with, you know, these broadcast sheets, and in baseball you have these stat packets, and you know, obviously the higher up the food chain you go, the more information you get provided by the teams or the colleges. So there's a million in there, and you make your charts for each broadcast, and I would probably use 10% of what's on there, but you just never know
Mhm.
Right.
what you're going to need.
So one of my clients actually, he was a long time ESPN statistician.
Okay.
So he did all of that. Had like
Oh
his
my God.
house was like stacks of papers everywhere, but just he was the numbers guy and like did that for 50 years.
Yeah, no,
in, like,
there's
the
guys who
DC
make their
area,
whole
yeah. It was
careers,
really
you know,
cool.
doing that, and you know, especially when you get up to like the national level, or if you're like my uncle and you have sitting next to you a stat
Right.
person who's
Yeah.
there and can, you know, if you're talking about somebody going on a run or all of a sudden somebody's made, you know, 5 threes in a row, they can look and just hand you these notes, and it's you know, it enhances the broadcast for
course.
sure.
Yeah. Got to have something to talk about during the whole
Right. Yeah,
time.
that's
You
right,
have to-
that's right.
You have to keep going. All right. Well, I mean, I could talk about that for a
I
lot
was gonna
longer.
say
This
that's
is a real
whole
estate
different
podcast.
podcast
Yeah.
maybe,
Right.
but
Very much is.
yeah,
And
I think-
like I said, if Brent was here, we would have trouble. I
Trouble.
think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should talk a little real estate.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
just like
guess.
10% real estate.
Yeah.
Okay.
we'll throw
So-
in some other sports questions.
Yeah.
throughout.
For sure. I just also want to say, like Steve Buckhantz. I'm from DC also,
Okay.
so I'm a unfortunate lifelong Bullets Wizards fan. Okay,
Ugh. I feel your pain.
you know, and but Buckhantz and Phil Chenier. I mean, it's like that's what I hear in my mind when I think about basketball. You know,
No, he is he's a legend.
Yeah.
You know, in the DC market. And to be honest, part of the reason I got into real estate, this is a good transition.
there
as
you
we
go.
say in the business. You know, I got into it before he and Phil, you know, parted ways with Comcast, but seeing what happened to him, because you know, he was, as we talked about, you know, beloved, and is still beloved in this town, and was at the top of his game. And normally when guys at that level leave, it's because, you know, they did something really dumb, or they made a, you know, big mistake on air, and there's some kind of clause, and you know, you have
Sure.
to go. But you know, he still loved doing the games, and you know, their broadcast was great. And for whatever reason, the Wizards and Comcast decided to make a change, which happens in the business all the time.
Sure.
But to me, I was like, wow, okay, if that can happen to my uncle, who, you know, is,
A legend.
I thought, about as close as you could get to as untouchable as possible. I was like, man, it really can happen to anybody.
Sure.
So I had already started to make the change into broadcasting, or pardon me, into real estate when that happened. But it just kind of reaffirmed, like, man, it is a tough business. Like, you can just,
Yeah.
you know, somebody else can get the broadcast rights, a new GM can come in for a network and just want to make a change, just to make a change.
Trends in media, and
Yeah.
also they're always trying to cater to whatever audience they think is like the next audience or the
Mhm.
current audience. And Steve Buckhantz and Phil Chenier are not young.
No.
Although it's still even for me, and I'm not like super old either. Like
Yeah.
that's like I don't know. It's like the
No,
classic
but to your point, the team has been so bad for so long
Right.
that a lot of the reason people would tune in is because of them.
Agreed.
just
Yeah.
because it was, it was a familiar face, familiar voice, and you knew what you're going to get with them, and it was a good broadcast.
Mhm.
The product was not so good, but they made
Right.
it fun to watch.
Agreed.
So, but that's the business, right? It can certainly happen to anybody.
So tell us about getting into real estate. Did you start right off as a realtor?
Yeah, so I was actually I was out west for a little while doing games for Portland and a couple schools, and I was doing some work for the Portland Timbers, and I was doing a weekly radio show, and I had met a lady at a Timbers event who was a big supporter, and we just started chatting and just connected, just a natural conversation, and she led a big team at KW. And she's like, "Have you ever thought about real estate?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I like watching $1 Million Listing like everybody else." And I said, I've always had an interest in it. And I kind of explained my background with my grandfather, but I never really thought about it as a career. And at that point, I was doing 60, 70 games a year, traveling quite a bit, the weekly show. So she said, "Well, just think about it." And we stayed in touch. And then finally, she's like, "Listen, just come work with me. And I know you have all these commitments at night, but start with me on this team and see if you like it, and we can take it from there." So I said, okay. So I started working with her, and she had a team of about 5 or 6 agents. It was her, one kind of marketing admin person, and then the agents. And so I started with her, and it started to build and build and build, and I really found myself enjoying it. And then I got to the point probably in my second year where I was starting to do some decent business, and I felt like I had to make a decision. Like I couldn't keep going doing all these games at night and doing the real estate during the day. I was running out of time.
I was gonna say, I feel like that would be
Yeah.
no
Exhausting.
downtime.
Exhausting.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Exhausting,
Yeah, it was. It was having to get up really early to do
Mhm.
prep for the games that night or whatever I was doing that week, and then trying to do the real estate stuff during
That's
the
too
day.
much.
Yeah, it was just a lot, and fortunately, the business was growing, but I just got to that tipping point, and then when I moved back to DC right before the pandemic started, and that's when I decided, because at that point I was still doing games for New York. I decided to just go all in on the real estate. I was like, I'm back home now. This is, I know DC. I felt like I could really build something here.
Mhm.
And I just knew I couldn't go back and forth between New York and travel and do all the games for them if I really wanted to build this. So that's when I decided to stop doing the broadcast work. And every once in a while, I got a call to do a game, and I still loved doing it, but I really had to just, as hard as it was, because it's still a passion.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
It's a lot of fun, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean that's half the the prep work and everything is the job, but the fun part is being in a stadium with 20,000 people,
Right.
and you're on the floor and you're like in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's that energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what made
You're the
it so,
guy.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
what made it so fun. So at that point I just said, you know what, I need to, if I'm really going to give it a shot, I need to do this. And that's when I decided to just put broadcasting to the side and kind of going all in on real estate.
Sure. How many years in Portland were you doing real estate then as well?
So I've done it now this is my 7th year total.
Okay.
So 2 years, 2 or 3 years out there before I made the transition back to
Got it.
DC.
So can I
Yeah.
just saw, I was looking at your social media earlier, so I
Mhm.
saw you received an award. I mean, I guess it was for 2022. Was it a 40 million plus award?
Yes.
That's pretty
Yeah.
amazing. For you, and are you by yourself, or do you have an assistant? How are you working?
I'm the team.
You're it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
That's pretty impressive.
thank you. Yeah. I mean, one of the things the pandemic allowed me to do was just kind of put my head down and really start to focus on the business. And like we were talking about before we started the podcast, at that point I was single. So I could work all
the
You
time
had
the
with
kids,
time.
yours.
Now my
no.
life dramatically, my girlfriend, her daughter moved
Right.
here about a year ago. And so my life has changed, and that's made it much more challenging.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
for those first couple years when I was back, I really was just able to kind of focus on building my business. And, I'm now at that point where I could certainly use some help. But for me, so I know some people like, Rob and Brett have a great team, and
Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor too, great team, right? For me, I think long term, I want to build a good team around me. I don't necessarily want to have a team of agents,
Yeah.
but I kind of want to focus on having really smart people around me, because like I know I'm terrible with social media. Like I do a little bit of it, but I don't really have a strategy or a game plan.
Mhm.
So having somebody who can really help with that, to help kind of build brand awareness, having someone on the, the marketing side or the admin side, because right now it is all me. I mean, I do everything.
Got it. So you don't outsource like anything,
Nothing.
like contracts to close or anything. It's
No.
all you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, I've been
A
very
lot.
fortunate that, I had a great year. The last couple years have been fantastic. Last year was
Yeah.
the best year of my career.
Mhm.
So, I'm always looking to, how can I build it? I don't want to take this, I don't want to go backwards. So it's just about how can you, in the markets, we're all in tune with the market and how much it's changed. So for me, it's just about, all right, well, what can I do to continue that momentum?
Right.
Exactly.
So, I mean, so you've been in it 7 years and you had 2 excellent years. Obviously, you're doing something really right. And, in that time period, though, like, if you took this time away from the broadcasting business, like you put that aside and now you're totally focused on real estate, you're putting in a lot of hours, though, to achieve a 40 million plus volume. You have to be putting in a lot of hours. I mean, between the showings and between the contract stuff and all the other conversations. But I mean, really, truthfully, to leverage those great years, the next step is like you got to build some kind of marketing machine.
Yeah, I
You
feel
know?
like having the right people in place
Yeah.
is key, and I haven't figured out how to do that yet. So I'm constantly thinking about it and talking to people, because I feel like, man, so my office is right next to
To Robin Brent's.
to
we
Robin
see each
Brent,
other every day.
right, and I'm like, okay, well, they've got a really, number one, to me, like with Robin Brent, they have like just the interaction in the office is great. Like everybody, like, they all get along. I feel like that's such a big part of it. It's just, number one, they're all good people.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, but to me, that's really that culture. That's really, you want to work with people
Right.
that you want to be around.
Right. You want work to be fun, and
Yeah, you
especially the
need
team
smart
that you're
people
around.
to do different things. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's about having a good group. And for me, it's like, part of the problem I have is I'm so hyper focused on every part of the business. It's like, well, how do I relinquish some of those
Sure.
things
Right.
and not
Control,
So, but being very aware that, yes, I do need help in these certain areas, because if I could get freed up, then that maybe allows me more time to do stuff with, or focus on areas of the business that maybe where I should be focused, versus
Right.
having to spend time just sending follow-up emails to see where we are with an inspection,
Right.
or whatever
gosh,
it is,
yeah.
stuff like that.
Where, what do you attribute a lot of this business coming from? Are you doing a lot of Zillow? Is it Sphere? Kind of what's your...
So it's a mix for me. I do Zillow.
Okay.
And I've been very successful with it.
Okay.
I think the people who are in it long term, like Michael Rankins and Jonathan Taylors and Max, people like you all, like, to me, it's like, if you're in it that long and you have that book of business, it's just about relationships. Michael Rankin doesn't need to spend money on Zillow.
Right.
He's got a great book of business, right? So I am trying to transition my business into that. But if I'm truthful and honest, I would say at least 50 to 60% of my business, maybe 70 if I'm really honest, is Zillow.
Wow.
I do really well with it. I focus on certain zip codes, and I've been doing it for a while. And for me, what I've been able to do to really help the business grow is leverage that initial client. And, it's very rare that you get a call from Zillow. It's like, hey, I want to go see this property on Swan Street. And you're like, okay, great. Let's go let's write an offer.
Sure.
That once in a blue moon, that has happened to me. I'm like, this is amazing. This is great. But for the most part, it's, you meet with a client. I usually bring a couple of the properties that, are similar to what they're looking at. But the big thing is I get them set up on a search that day, and a lot of times it's like, oh, well, I'm sort of working with someone, or I have someone in mind. I'm like, okay, great. Just come meet with me. Let's go look at this. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. And if you want to work with that person, that's fine. But ultimately, I would say my conversion rate is probably 9 out of 10 people that I meet with, I'll work with.
Yeah, because you're
That's
willing. It
great.
sounds like this is probably what I'm not willing to do anymore. At least is some leads. I try to qualify them just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because it's like there's a lot of times I've done it before. Believe me, I've done the running around.
Yeah.
But it's like if you're trying to build this book of business, from like more from the ground up, you're gonna have to put the feet on the ground a little more.
Yeah, no, and that's the trade-off. Is like, man, my days I can be in Capitol Hill in the morning, and then in Cathedral Heights or out in McLean. It's just it's all over the place. But the one area that I've really been able to leverage is once that initial deal is done, is to then put them in the sphere, make them part of the family, and invite them to all of the events and stay in touch. I try and do 50 calls a week. I try and write 10 notes. I try and do a lunch or a coffee with one client. And I get them in the rotation. And like last year, my best referral partner was a Zillow client from 2 years ago, and I closed 6 deals from him.
Awesome.
So I feel like that's where you can really leverage.
Right.
Zillow it's almost not the initial deal. It's okay, well then, how can I make them part of the family and get them in? So for me, it's about trying to really leverage that, but ultimately moving that business to strictly sphere, because for me, I'm, at least 70% buyer heavy. Now, some of those people that I've been working with for a couple of years now, it started to turn over, and now I'm starting to get some listings, which is great. Sure. But I feel like ultimately, most people want to have a balanced business,
right?
So you're not running around every day, like I'm doing.
Well, but that's how you start. That's how you build it.
Yeah,
it's really with the buyers. But I will say, so you mentioned the events and then 50 calls and 10 notes. Is there a Kolker method here? Is there some benefit you can give to our listeners? Like, is there a formula you're using that you stick by that helps you schedule yourself?
So I am diligent about being in the office. Number one, I have the best office space on the second floor.
You do, yeah. Whoever has designed your office space, it is beautiful.
Not me, but my sister and her best friend. I give them all the credit.
Wow.
But I was the first one on the second floor.
Yes.
And I told Dave, I was like, I want this space. And I was just me for about 6 months. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, everybody started coming up, and it's actually great to have life and activity up there. Yeah. But I am much more purposeful if I'm in the office versus sitting at home, dealing with, a 10-year-old who's losing her mind over something, or my girlfriend, or whatever. So
for me, it's always like, there's some other load of laundry I didn't do.
Right.
And
it's like I don't. Yeah.
Or you're like staring at the dishes, and you're like, I should.
Yeah, I'm getting questions about breakfast.
No, time to make those calls.
Did we eat?
Right.
Or did we not eat? Or what are we packing for lunch? Or it's just like I can't handle all of that and work. So for me, if it's key to get into the office, and what I try and do is get in the morning, by 9 if I can, and start to do the calls and the notes. Sometimes lately I've been doing things where, like, on Monday I'll just knock out all 10 notes, because we all get busy, and it's really, I think the hardest thing in our job, it's really easy to get distracted, and I'm guilty of it too, where just sometimes, especially if I have a couple showings in the morning or I have an event, right, then it's hard to get back on track. So I just think the more purposeful you can be with coming up with some kind of routine. So for me, it's about being there in the morning, making those calls, scheduling what trying to schedule that lunch or that coffee, writing those notes just to get them done and out of the way. And then hopefully for me, I'm spending the afternoons out and about, on appointments or, with clients or whatever it is. So, I think whatever you can do to kind of make it routine, the more successful, because it's not the fun part of the business, a lot of times I'm calling just to check in on people. I'm not necessarily asking for business, but for me, and I know a lot of us have done the ninja training, and I think
you've done ninja.
I've done ninja. I also do Buffini coaching,
okay,
which I think are very similar platforms. It's just not platforms. They're very similar philosophies. At the end of the day, it's about working with people that are in your sphere, and there's different. They diverge a little bit on how you get there, but the message is still the same. It's about working with your sphere and building your business, and really building those referrals. So for me, it's about utilizing those tactics to, how can I be smart about that? Because at the end of the day, I think for us, it's about staying top of mind, right? So that when somebody does have a friend who needs help, or somebody's thinking about selling or buying, that you come to mind, right?
Sure.
Like it was crazy. I had a transaction earlier this year. It was a Zillow lead that started out in AU Park. They live in Arlington. They bought a $2.1 million home in Lion Village, and then I sold their condo in Arlington for it was just over $1 million. Now they bought their condo just over 2 years ago, not even. Where was that agent? Like, that's not that long ago. Like, that guy lost out on, $3.5 million worth of business because they should have never called Zillow.
Right.
Yeah, really.
Like that's my
the
point.
Fact
it's
that
like
it came through Zillow.
all he has to do, all we
yeah.
have to do is just stay in, just stay in touch. Just a quick call to say hello, a quick pop by, just a note.
So for that house in Lion Village,
Yeah.
that's a very desirable location.
Yeah.
It's not hard to find a new listing in Lion Village because there aren't many.
No.
Especially in that category, right?
Yeah.
So they literally like hit the button on Zillow and
they hit the button on Zillow for a property in AU Park that we went and saw.
I see.
And that's just as tough, that neighborhood.
Right.
Yep.
Man.
Yep.
So they were a younger couple, and they were trying to decide whether they wanted to be in Northwest DC or stay in Arlington. And there were some things about DC that they liked and some things about Arlington. So this one property really stood out. So we went and saw it, and they didn't love it. And I was like, man, it was one of those that it came on the market, and I was like, there's gonna be 100 offers.
Yeah,
so
totally.
if you're not ready, if you're number one, if you don't love it, let's not put an offer in. But if you do, we got to go all in. Like, we can't mess around.
Yeah.
And I'll never ever put pressure on anybody to put in an offer. But I'll just, I'll try and be honest and assess each situation. I'm like, listen, there's going to be multiple offers, so you guys need to decide if you want to. If not, totally understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I could tell they really liked it. They were really thinking about it, but at the end of the day, it wasn't the right home for them. So I set them up on a search, and we set up AU Park in Northwest, and then the other area they mentioned was Lion Village. And then this new listing came on the market, and we went and saw it, and it all worked out. But the original lead did come from the DC side,
from Zillow.
And when you say you set them up on a search, is that just an MLS search, or do you do like Real Scout?
Real Scout.
Like that? Okay,
Wow, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was a huge change for me, probably about a year ago. Originally, I was doing everything through MLS, and then the other thing I'll do as part of that morning routine is, I'm not even in the morning. I do it constantly. I'm constantly on Real Scout looking to see what people are looking
Who's looking at what.
And every once in a while, I'll set up a search. Like, if I know there's someone that is interested in a certain area, but they're looking for something super specific, or they're not that serious, whatever the situation may be, I will set up a search to myself for their criteria, and then I can just send them listings.
Sure.
But for most people, whether it's the Zillows or a referral, I set them up immediately in Real Scout. I follow up to make sure they got that search, and then we go from there. And I think it's a really useful platform because it's really easy to, you can see what people are looking at. You can see when they favored something. They can send you a message right on the platform. You can reply it. The mobile version of it is, I think, very user friendly. I'm not that tech savvy, and I think it's just very easy to use and interactive. So I will immediately, and I tell all these, all my clients who I start with on Zillow, I know you're still going to look on Zillow. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
Because it's habit. So I said, listen, I'm going to set you up on the search. You're going to get to see some upcoming listings that you might not see on Zillow. You're going to get through our Sotheby's brand. I'll talk about the power of the brand. You'll see some off-market stuff. So they'll usually look at both simultaneously. But for me, I think that way, if I can see what they're looking at, or if I kind of know what they're looking at, I can go online in the morning, and I can also just send them properties right through Real Scout, and it's really easy to use.
So I don't know if it was Ninja where they talked about the funnel. Is that like the method?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what I tell my buyers. Right. I say, I'm going to set you up on a search. We have different tools for that. Obviously, we have the MLS portal, Real Scout. Zenlist is another app that does a similar type of product. And then, but they're always looking on Redfin and Zillow.
Of course.
But we got to put it all into the funnel.
Right.
And we're working to get it down to that one property that we're eventually going to find.
Yeah, because I feel like with the advantage that we have with Real Scout or whatever it is that you're using is you can make it much more focused than a lot of times with a Zillow or a Redfin search, right? Like, I can draw a really specific map if I want to. I can put in certain criteria maybe that they're looking for, in all the fields to really kind of narrow down. So, what they're looking at on Zillow or Redfin might be more general, but what they're really looking at through the search we've set up is going to hit more of those boxes.
Right. Well, and I feel too on Zillow and Redfin, you don't have as many of those filters, like you're saying, like for realtors. So like sometimes buyers will send me properties, and it's like, maybe they're a buyer that says they must have a parking space, and it's like all the stuff you're sending me from Zillow doesn't have a parking space. Right. So then they're like, oh crap, okay, yeah.
And a lot of times too, especially with condos in DC, the information on Zillow is inaccurate.
Correct.
In terms of what the condo fee covers, or if there is one, or so.
Right.
It's really hard to tell this
Right.
way. Like if it's coming right from Real Scout, which is MLS, then it's going to be much more accurate
For
in terms of
sure.
what they're saying.
We're here with Tom Kolker from TTR Sotheby's International Realty in Washington, D.C. So do you use a separate CRM? Are you using a CRM product right now?
Yeah, so I use the Buffini CRM.
Okay.
It's called Referral Maker. And what I like about that CRM is it's very geared toward the idea of working by referral. You put all of your, you import all your clients, you label them, A+, A, B, C, whatever it is. And then on kind of the homepage at the very top, there are, your to-dos, and you're supposed to hit your A+ clients so many times, a month, in your A's, and it's either phone call, note, or pop by. So I can see everything there. I can add my own follow-ups right in there. Like if I know someone has, everybody I put in when we close, I put in the system to the closing date to remind myself about a home anniversary. So the system is it's very user friendly, and it's geared toward trying to work by referral as far as that method goes. It prioritizes those A's and B's, and then you can certainly set up groups within that, whether it's for email blast or whatever. But it's not the most complicated system, and I like that. It's just if someone's trying to work by referral, it's a good one to
That's
to work
interesting.
with. Yeah.
Is it something that you have to be in the coaching to
No,
get, or he has this?
No,
is like
you can
separate?
I think you can totally just get the Referral Maker CRM. It's like any other CRM where you can buy it separately. But if you've done Ninja, or you just kind of want to build your business around that philosophy, it's definitely geared toward that. So I would recommend it for anybody who's looking for something like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay. Good recommendation.
Yeah.
Do you have any mentors in the business?
That's a really good question. I mean, one of the biggest reasons I joined Sotheby's was I had done 3 or 4. I was at KW prior, and I had done 3 or 4 deals with Sotheby's agents, and I thought, man, these are really smart people. Like every deal went really well. There was very little drama. Like in our world, there can be a lot of doing a deal to me is hard enough.
Sure.
Like we don't need to make it more complicated, people.
Yep.
And sometimes agents can make it more complicated than it really needs to be. So I just felt like, okay, wow, these are really smart agents. It's a great brand. And part of when I was trying to make that transition, like how do I continue to leverage and build my business? Like I want to be associated with this great brand. So that's really one of the main reasons that I joined TTR, was just the relationship I had with the agents and the deals I had done. But Dave DeSantis is great, our broker in the downtown office. I rely on him a lot. I talk to Rob and Brent all the time. Especially Rob. I've done a couple deals with Rob, and he and I think are pretty close. And I like the way that the group runs their business. I've talked to Russell Firestone a lot. And what's nice is you can call some of these people in our office have are done such big deals. I did one with Michael Rankin, and I can pick up the phone and call Michael Rankin, and he'll answer.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which is great. And you can just bounce questions or ideas off anybody, and for me that's super helpful. So I wouldn't say there's any one person. Jim Bell is another great resource in our office.
Right.
So there's other great folks at other brokerages. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like we're very lucky to have the folks we have. And I can call Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
And just ask him.
They're extremely personal.
Yeah.
All of them.
I can ask. I had a kind of a crazy listing in McLean, and to be able to sit down with Jonathan for 10 minutes after one of our team meetings and just have him walk through it with him, or Mark Loam, and to be able to get what do you guys think? How, am I handling this correctly? How would you handle this? It's great. It's
also good that you come to ask. This is another key thing that a lot of agents get into trouble out here because they're not asking the right questions or any questions, and then it's all of a sudden the brokers are getting the wrong calls.
Right.
So
Right.
better to ask.
Yeah, I think it's, also, having less experience than both of you, it is kind of like almost feeling nervous in a way. But then when you talk to one of these really, successful and agents that has so many years of experience, you're like, oh, we're not so different. I mean, you have 20 years more experience than me and have done, many millions more dollars of deals. But at the end of the day, we're all trying to get to the
and sometimes it's like you're just trying to get somebody's perspective on something, on how you have one train of thought on how you might want to handle a situation or deal with a question with a client, but just to get somebody else's perspective.
Sure.
It's it's
and people
helpful.
Always want to share most of the time.
Yeah.
They like having
really
those
special
questions
people.
It's literally why this podcast exists.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we like to talk about this stuff all the time.
Right.
Yeah. We do it every day, right?
Yeah. I have a question. So, I mean, coming from starting your career in real estate on the West Coast and then coming to the East Coast, what have you found maybe as the biggest differences? West Coast versus East Coast? Is there, anything that stands out or any challenges that you have? So
for me, the hardest thing being, especially out west in the Pacific Northwest, which I think is a lot different than California.
Sure.
And LA in that market. The pace of life out west in the Northwest is much slower, just the day to day. So, I grew up here. I have that East Coast energy. Like I work really hard. I go all the time. And maybe that's to a fault sometimes. Those of you guys, my girlfriend or my family, like they would certainly say that.
They'll be thankful later.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
pays off.
Yeah, hopefully.
If they still like you,
if they know, if they remember who you are.
No, like I literally have to now schedule in one day during the week where I do something with Sam, like we go play racquetball or tennis or do the whatever the thing is, right?
She told me that one time. I think I was hosting an open house for you, and she came in and she was like, "Yeah, I have to make him. We schedule our day I'm like, smart.
Yeah, so I'm really trying, but it's tough. So I'm backtracking, but just out there, the pace is much slower, and it just things, people aren't. There's no sense of urgency a lot of times. So for me, that was hard because like I would do a showing, or I want to put an offer in, and kind of just the lack of urgency to get answers or replies. That was always tough. But the market out the Northwest is so. If you've never been out there, it's such a beautiful area. Portland and Seattle are similar in terms of kind of like the lifestyles. Seattle's a much bigger space, like just the downtown visually, the buildings. But Portland is beautiful. You got the beach an hour away. You got Mount Hood. So if you're into the outdoors, it's an awesome place to be. And it's kind of become like a tech and apparel. I mean, you have Nike, which is in Beaverton. It'd be like the same thing if Nike was located in McLean. It's that close to downtown, and it's a campus. Like it is it's like a college campus. Yeah. You have Adidas there, Columbia Sportswear. So it's a big kind of athletic brand apparel space. Sure. So it's unique. It's a really cool food and wine city. There are more microbrews in Portland than anywhere. It's a great space if you're into wine. The Willamette Valley is like an hour away, and they grow the best Pinot Noir in the world. I had no idea what that was till I moved out there, but man, they like their wine.
When I used to drink, I knew that was where the best Pinot Noir.
Yes, if you're ever in a restaurant, you see Willamette Valley.
Right.
You know it's going to be decent.
Well, I definitely think the craft brewery is there.
Yeah, it's just
and coffee, right?
Oh my god, yeah. It is. It's like if you ever watched Portlandia.
That's it.
They're not like
they're not kidding.
No, it is dramatized a little bit, but
sure.
They're getting it from somewhere, and it's not that far off.
Right.
It's just a great show. But yeah, I would just say, it's every market's going to be a little different. And out there were certain neighborhoods that were, like being in downtown Portland. There was an area called Lake Oswego, which is like the Bethesda or McLean, which is super sought after. So it was just about learning for me, not being from there. It was just kind of about learning the different neighborhoods, learning the different parts of downtown, and kind of figuring out what my niche was going to be in that market.
So coming back to DC, obviously you're super familiar with everything here. How do you feel about how this city has evolved since we were young? Like
it's crazy. It's changed so much. I mean, even when I was at GW, like 14th Street wasn't a thing. When we went out to Midtown or into Georgetown, like it was Mad Hatter on 19th Street. Like,
right.
That's where we went. So no, just to see like the evolution of 14th Street, Noma, to see what that is now. I live over on Capitol Hill, pretty far east, and kind of the evolution there, and even to some of the neighborhoods further out now. It is pretty amazing to see how much the city has changed. And, to me, DC will always be, there will always be a need for housing. It will always be a destination city because of the government and all. It's such a unique place. There's no other market like it because of the government and all the jobs and industries around it. So I think that's why it really makes it interesting for our line of work.
Right.
With people coming and going, and I've listened. We've all harped about the lack of inventory that continues to be an issue, and but for me, I just think seeing these different neighborhoods evolve and grow, it's pretty interesting. It's not just Northwest anymore. Like Noma was not a thing when we were growing up.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't. Even you look back at how much like Chinatown changed when they put in the Verizon Center, or
MCI Center.
Right. Like that was it was like just some office buildings.
Well, going back to sports though, I really think that the sea change for that area wasn't just the construction of the MCI Center. It was also when Jordan played with the Wizards. That place was packed every single night.
Yeah.
And that's when other businesses started to sprout up around there because they knew that they would have actual people down there visiting.
Yeah.
So, and then the Jose Andres restaurant scene down there, it just evolved from there.
Right. But you look at that, you look at Navy Yard, and obviously what has taken place down there, and now all the new construction around Audi Field. So I mean, it's amazing to see the city change the way it has.
For sure. Do you have a prediction as to, kind of maybe what the next neighborhood might be, or one that you're keeping an eye on?
So, to me, I'm always looking like further out in probably northeast. Yeah. The closer you get toward the Maryland line, or even southeast on the other side of the river, like that, to me, if you're thinking 5-10 years from now, where's a good place to, if I just put my investment hat on, that's probably where I'm looking. But even the changes at like Brooklyn or Langdon, like it's remarkable to see how some of those areas have started to develop and continue to. But places like DuPont, Georgetown, Logan, those will always be sought after because of the name.
For sure.
Especially with Zillow, I work with a lot of people who are moving here from out of state, and they know Georgetown because they know the name,
brand name,
right? So those areas are not going to appreciate like some of these other places, but they're always going to be sought after. But I think if you're thinking about kind of where's the next thing, it's like you got to look out, out in Northeast pretty deep, or out Anacostia, as far as where the real potential is to where the city is going to grow.
So, in working with buyers through Zillow and other buyers who come to you from wherever they come from referrals, do you have a niche in terms of like price range or anything? Are you working with pretty much everyone that comes your way as best as possible?
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing with Zillow. You can certainly, the range can vary, or it can vary dramatically. So, on one hand, I might be working with a client who's looking for, a first-time home buyer who just moved to DC to take their first job, working at a nonprofit, and we're looking at a $400,000 or $500,000 condo. And at the same time, I might be working. I just had a closing right off 14th Street for just under $2 million, and that was a Zillow client moving down here from New York. So it can range, pretty dramatically. Part of it too is the zip codes you're in. So like for me, as far as the Zillow stuff goes, I'm in Logan Circle, Capitol Hill, like the AU area, and then a little bit in McLean. So I know naturally I'm going to get people who are looking kind of in those areas. So I think the biggest advantage I have is, obviously being from DC and knowing the different neighborhoods really well.
That helps a lot.
Right.
Yeah, because people are coming in from all these different areas, whether it's New York or Texas or California, and they may have an idea of what they're looking for, or they'll tell me, okay, I want A, B, and C. And I'm like, okay, well, I can immediately tell you we should focus on these 3 neighborhoods because everything that you want, this is where you're going to find that. Or some people come in with the idea, I want to be in Georgetown. Well, that's great. Let's talk about your budget.
Right.
Because and then we talk about budget, and it's like, okay, we need to shift because you can't afford anything in Georgetown. So I think one of the areas where I've been able to be really successful with the Zillow stuff especially is just really having that first conversation and understanding what the client is looking for, and then really being able to kind of guide them on, what neighborhoods that they should focus on, just based off of their needs.
So we've had a few guests on here who were very Zillow heavy when they first started out, and then sort of evolved away from doing Zillow. So I'm wondering if maybe you picked up on some of that, like with your Zillow spend and your Zillow focus, because some of these other agents have sort of moved away from it. Because it sounds like you're doing really well with it.
Right.
Yeah, my spend, everybody's budget is different, but when I increased my budget kind of the first year, and then it's been pretty consistent ever since. I know there are some groups, larger groups, who are spending $50,000-$60,000, which is and they're getting,
but they also have 20 agents.
They're capturing a big market share. So for me, I think the key with it is, it's certainly expensive. I try and focus on being in the top 3 in any zip code I'm in.
Zip code,
and then I also really focus on being best of Zillow. I have like a 99% score, which the biggest advantage of it is just the bonus they give you, the extra lead, which is important. So I try to be really smart, and I have a call once a month with my Zillow rep. Just I want to see what they're seeing on their end from just traffic. And I'm always trying to adjust my strategy as I can. But, the zip codes around here sell out pretty quickly. But, like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, ultimately long term, like I want my business, I think, to be in a long term, I want to be 100% referral. So I will probably over the next couple of years start to, reduce the spend, unless I do end up maybe adding a person or two who can help me. But I think it's natural to kind of ramp it up, and then so for some people, either their business model changes or they have enough business where they don't need that kind of that new influx of buyer business, and it's just natural to move away from that.
Right.
So I'm certainly, it's still certainly a big part of my business, but my goal, my plan is to ultimately, kind of wean off of it at some point and just make it referral.
Well, and the zip codes that you have are highly desired. So was there a way that you got those, or
I mean, when I started out, I had a pretty small budget and I could only be in one zip code. But you're kind of looking at, so every zip code's a little different in terms of the average price point, right? So Georgetown's going to be more expensive than Logan. And DuPont is going to be more expensive than, Noma maybe, or whatever it is. So, the idea is they're looking at the average number of calls in each zip code, and then they're going to allocate so many agents in that zip code. And then based off of your spend, obviously, you're going to rank somewhere in there. So you're kind of looking at that sweet spot of, okay, if I spend X amount, these are how many calls I'm going to get. And I know that if I'm going to be in McLean, I'm going to get less phone calls because it's a much higher price point, but those are going to be much higher, average value homes and higher leads, versus like if you're in 2009, you have a much bigger coverage area, but you could get a call for a $300,000 studio, or you could get a call for a $2 million townhouse. So what I've kind of learned over the years is, for me, especially being a solo agent, it's more about the quality. When I initially started, I was trying to capture as much space as I could because I just wanted the volume. Now that I've done a little bit more, for me, it's like I would rather trade, instead of maybe getting 10 calls a month, I'd rather get 5, but I'd rather have 5 higher quality leads and higher price points.
Definitely.
But if you're just starting out, it might, you may want to look at just trying to capture as much as you can. But it's like when you start to do it, you literally just have to go in their platform and see how much inventory is available. There's hardly any ever inventory in Capitol Hill or, some of the more established neighborhoods. And it's like maybe when a big group decides to exit out, that inventory opens up. Or if Zillow, if they see enough traffic to the website, they'll open more inventory for agents. But it's, it's just about playing around with it. But it's not cheap. It is expensive. But I've just been able to kind of make it work for me.
Yeah, we used to spend money on Zillow, never a ton, but I've had over the years some decent leads from Zillow. Obviously, we spend zero now. But it's like, to be fair, I mean, it's
you don't need to.
But true, but it's still a great resource, even for even more established agents. I think it's just the thing about what it is working with people and trying to capture the lead is a certain type of energy and a certain type of, it's just totally different business model. And so what you're doing, like with like bringing these people in, making them immediately part of your sphere, making sure that you stay on top of that, and like they're new to you, it takes a lot of extra work. It really does.
No, and that is key. I mean, the one thing that you have to do that, and going in that, okay, there's some level of interest because they're looking on this platform to buy something, whether it's, today or 6 months from now. So you have their attention from that. So it's really just about that first phone call or that first connection or that first meeting is so crucial. Because a lot of people, I can tell you how many times I take that phone call. It's like, oh, I'm already working with someone.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. Sure. Or I have a friend. I'm like, okay, great. Like just, I'll play and say, listen, have you signed an exclusive agreement with someone? If they say yes, I say, okay, great. You should
call that agent.
Call your agent then, because I can't help you here. But I'll always say, if something happens with that relationship, I'll send a follow-up email. I'll be happy just to be a resource for you. If anything, for whatever reason, it doesn't work out with that person. But like I said earlier, if I can get in front of the client, then more often than not, they'll end up working with me. And I think that's the key to it. Because I think some people, it's crazy that Zoe was telling me on a call how many people the answer rate sometimes can be really poor.
Yeah.
Like, you're paying for
that. That's what you want.
How will you not pick up the phone?
Yeah.
Or how do you not follow up? Like that's, you're just throwing money away at that point. It's like, it's hard enough to convert people who are engaged and interested. That's going to take a while.
But I think that's a testament to your work ethic too. Is what you're talking about. It's like that's what you're spending the time doing. It's like you're ready to pick up the call. You're not like, oh, I just want to, take a nap right now. Like, and then here comes that Zillow call, and you're like,
yeah,
you got to be like,
you have to be ready to take it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Just how do you keep up with real estate news and changes in the industry? What are your top resources for that right now?
So I don't have like one specific thing that I'll look to, but I'll look at Inman, I'll look at the Wall Street Journal. One thing that's great is each week in the downtown office, Dave sends out kind of articles that he's read over the week or the weekend, and a lot of those I think are really helpful.
How am I not on that?
You're not part of the downtown.
I'm not part of the downtown office.
We can forward it to you.
Club.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
maybe ask Dave. He might.
I'm sure Dave could add me.
Yeah,
we can add you to that evening. No, but I think because there's so many different sources out there for news these days that it's tough to kind of wrap your head around. I watch. So while I'm at my office, I always have CNBC on in the background. Because I just kind of, I'm not market savvy, but I kind of like just to know what's going on. And their housing stuff, I think a lot of times is really interesting when they do the different segments. So for me, it's just about having kind of a broad picture of what's going on, but then being able to really, understand what's going on in our market. And, the best thing I think is just talking to other folks in our office or other agents, just to kind of get an idea of what they're seeing, especially if certain folks are very specific in neighborhoods. Especially like I had a couple of deals recently in Petworth. I haven't done a lot of business in Petworth, but for one reason or another, I've had clients end up there. So being able to talk to some of the folks in our office who know that neighborhood really well, to be able to understand, okay, I'm going to put an offer in, like, what do you think about where we're coming in and some of the terms, I think is really helpful.
Tom, thank you so much for coming down today and sharing time with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Leslie's going to hit you with rapid fire questions.
Okay, let's do it.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay. What are you currently reading, or do you read? I guess maybe we'll.
Of course he reads. The man reads.
No, but of course you do.
So number one, not consistently. When I do read, though, sometimes I try and read at night because I have a hard time sleeping, so just to turn my mind off. So I'll either read some kind of mystery, or like I'm kind of a history person, so I'll read about like the American Revolution or just something that has nothing to do with real estate.
Okay.
Anything you recommend right now?
What was the last good? I read a really good mystery, but it was one of those like Poirot mysteries, just like super easy. You don't have to think about it. You can just read it. Anything by Agatha Christie.
Great. Favorite restaurant?
My favorite restaurant, being a DC native, has always been the Palm.
Okay.
It's a
Total
like,
classic.
Yeah, like a good steak. But there's so many good options now in DC.
Who would play you in a movie?
That's a great question. So I've had many people recently tell me I look like this one of the guys from Succession. So
Okay, I
maybe
see
that guy, or the guy, the cop from what was the girls movie where they go to the wedding movie?
Oh, Bridesmaids.
Bridesmaids?
Oh
The
my
cop
gosh.
from Bridesmaids.
Sure. Yes.
So one of those guys.
I can see that.
I like it.
That's great. Would you rather get coffee with Oprah or Obama?
Obama.
Okay. And
Just straight. It's like, okay, next.
Yeah.
It's an easy answer.
okay, last
I
thing.
mean, unless is Oprah going to give me a car afterwards? Like,
Right.
what are we talking
Maybe.
about?
See, that's why maybe you take that.
All right.
Yeah.
I should
Okay.
rethink that.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, last one. What is your go-to that you listen to in the car?
Oh, okay. So I am in the car all day, every day.
Right.
So I mix it up between DC 101, 106.7, or 99.1.
DC 101. This guy is old school DC.
He's
I mean,
DC
he's listening to
through
DC
and
101.
through.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not, yeah. I don't have fancy things. I just put on the radio. Yeah.
Wow. All right, Tom. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Keyed In with your hosts, Max and Brent, unlocking the minds of the industry's top real estate professionals. For more information on selling your home, find us online at keyedinpodcast.com. Remember to subscribe to Keyed In on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Keyed In Podcast, at Rabin Max, and at Brent E. Jackson. And follow Max on TikTok at MaxwellRabin_properties.